Okay.
So welcome everybody to F4S Digital Maths for Girls conversation. I'm really, really excited that we have here Kay Brookes and also Dinika Mahtani. Kay has a fascinating background and is currently at AWS, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what she's done before. When she talks, and then Dinika, again, you're currently at a jump at Uber, which is another amazing job. Both of them fast-growing companies using maths every day. This particular insight is for students who at the moment are not in class, they are at home. And this is to help them understand what the future, when they're ready for the workforce, what that's going to look like. So we're really going to ask you to touch on how did maths play a part in your life. Did you think you'd be doing mathematical things? Did you love math? Did you hate math? How did you think about that? And has it helped you? Did it inspire you to choose your career path, or did it inspire you, or did it enable you? Really love some insights into what you do at your company. And I think, I have no idea what you actually do. So I'd love to see, if there's a typical day, it'd be great to know what that is. You may not have typical days, in which case maybe just talk about yesterday. Most importantly, probably is the skills that you would recommend people think about acquiring if they wanted to have a role, a job like yours in the future. And I know that there's been a huge amount of change, in recent times about the sorts of skills. We used to think one sort of skill, but again, with the world being changed and industries being changed very rapidly, literally by both Ubers and AWSs, they're almost unrecognizable. So if you were, 11 to 15 at the moment, what would you, what skills should they be focusing on? Is it communication skills, creativity skills, math, statistics, art? What might that be? And I'd love to hear also that, say, the last 10 roles that you've hired for. What were you looking for? And again, I think that will help bring the world of work to life for the people who are, zooming into, for this sort of inspiration. I think I'm going to start with Kay. Okay. So what we'd like you to do is talk for 5 to 7 minutes about those sorts of things, and then we're gonna turn over to Dinika, and then we're going to invite questions from the audience. Okay. And if you're in the we have safeguarded this particular webinar. So for you, it may look a little bit different than normal. We suppress the ability for students' photos to be shown because they're under the age when we should be doing that. And we've also suppressed the ability for them to chat with you. And that's also a safeguarding measure that we need to do in order to keep you, not that you would be dodgy in any way whatsoever, but we have to, that's why we do that. And that's why this might look a little bit different to you. If you're one of the students watching and you wish to participate, there's the Q&A, which we would encourage you to pop your question in there anytime. And when it comes time to ask Kay and Dinika questions, I'll turn to those, and we'll go through them in that order, and I'll read out the questions. I think when you ask your questions, if you could maybe say your age and possibly what part of the country you're from, that will help. It will help us know a little bit more context about you. So, Kay, you're on the hot spot. If you want to start, that would be great. Thank you again.
So, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I think this is a really interesting topic. What's quite interesting for me is I have 2 children who are totally different. One is a chartered accountant, so very, very maths orientated, and the other one is a teacher who absolutely avoided maths like the plague. And I remember that sort of similar scenario when I was at school, and my brother always being the brains and everybody telling me how good he was, and that also made me fear of actually doing something about it. But the thing about maths is it's very logical. It's very black and white. There was always a right answer. And actually getting it wrong was actually okay, because it made you take a risk and learn from it. And if I think about my jobs that I've had over my career, taking a risk, no one's ever said to me, oh, I can't believe you did that. They've gone, hey, what did you learn? What would you do differently? And if you think about maths problems, that's something that they're there. It's very black and white, and the way that my brother taught me and my daughter taught her brother was put it into context of things you understand. So if you want to know what 50% is, and my son would look at her and go, I have no idea what she's talking about, she would put it in two formats. One is he was a sports player. So he knew that 100% of a sports team, he knew how many players he needed. So she said, imagine you've only got 5 of those or 6 of those. He'd say, well, I've only got half a team. Then she'd say, okay, well, that's 50%. Or she would do it in something like a cake or something that he could visualize, because he had the creativity mind and not the logical mind. And there started to be things that he started to understand it, and he started to get right answers. And once he got some right answers, he was then encouraged to do more. And I think that's what gave him the confidence was, I don't want to appear stupid. I don't want to put my hand up and ask the stupid question because I've got a very smart sister. But actually just putting into context of what he understood really, really helped him.
Can you go back to your career journey from when you were, say, 15 to what you're doing now? I think that would be just sketch it out really briefly, but did you always work at AWS or?
No. So when I was sort of looking to leave school, there was a lot of push to go to university. I got offered a place at Loughborough to study sport, but I wanted to take a gap year. A girlfriend of mine convinced me to join Lloyds Bank to work on the cashiers, and I thought, oh, this is going to be quite fun. And then Lloyds Bank convinced me to do a degree in law relating to banking. So totally wasn't expecting it. Really, the math side of it would help me, but in the banking world, it was more about just, can you count money and can you deal with customers? But what it did was it gave me that foundation. And then from there, I went to work for Hewlett Packard, large computer company, and worked in sales. And the thing about sales is you need to be able to calculate what you're going to earn, because you get paid commission, and that's really important. You also need to be able to calculate and on the spot what your customers are going to buy and how they're going to buy from you. So you need to have the foundation. You don't have to be a genius, but you have to have a foundation, and you have to understand what discounts. And then from there, I went to a startup, and I was 5th in the UK from this startup, but they turned into be a 15,000 employee large corporate, $7.5 billion company. So I was at the very ground roots. I did everything from answering the phone to making the tea to getting the builders to do, sort of to build us, I suppose. And then from that, what I did is I became head of reward. And that meant paying people and making sure they paid commission on time, and dealt with banks and dealt with finances and also cross-currency. So, totally needed to have that experience behind me. And then from there, I joined DXC. DXC was the largest merger of 2 IT companies, Hewlett Packard and CSC, and I was the ops director for one company, and we merged the 2 together. And a merger is something that's a phenomenal experience. And from that, I then got headhunted to AWS. And in AWS, I lead sales productivity for EMEA, and that is looking at blockers and challenges that our sales team face every single day in the business that they're in, and then how can we eliminate them? So writing programs, bringing up initiatives. But the key thing about it, and it really is, I drive change through results. And so we're having to deep dive into data. But what I don't do is, I'm not a maths I'm maths educated in terms of I've got, GCSE, but I don't use it in my job today. What I use in my job today is my intelligence, experience, and having that ability to communicate. And one of the things the maths has enabled me to do the jobs, because you have to be able to, deliver results, and you have to be able to deep dive in a lot of the stuff that we do. But if I look at the last 10 people that I've hired, which was one of your key points, I would hire them on their personality, because I'm a great team player and I think you need to be a team player in any business, but I would also hire them on the fact that they could bring something different to the team. So that might be they are more creative, they may be more sporty, they may be more arty, because I think the way that my team is always successful is if you have that diversity and inclusion. So we don't just hire IT professionals, and that would not make a good team in my opinion.
Great. There's a question from a 13-year-old in Manchester saying, do you work with engineering?
No, I don't. Well, no, because that's not part of my role. But I also lead one of the affinity groups called Women at. AWS and Amazon have a lot of affinity groups, so I lead one of the membership groups, and one of those is Women at Engineering. And so my involvement with that is they are helping us decide tools that will help us keep members and volunteers on a database. So yes, I do, but not in my sort of daily role and context.
Okay, and then have you ever, can you talk a little bit about resiliency? Has everything always gone swimmingly, or have sometimes you had setbacks, and how have you thought through those setbacks? And I hate, I hate the word failure, because I think failure is a learning experience, but
yes,
sometimes things don't go according to plan. When things don't go according to plan, how do you react? And then we'll come over to Dinika right after.
Okay, so when I first, went on maternity leave to have children from HP, HP at the time weren't really recruiting people back, so I joined a startup, and everybody said, you're mad, you've joined a startup. And if you think about a startup, it's got no money, it's got no contracts. So my job was to negotiate with companies like British Telecom or a builder to get something done. And I spent probably the first year thinking, well, what am I doing? But the thing that kept me going was having faith, knowing that there was nothing more that I could do, that I, felt that that was the best that I could do, and I was giving the best experience. But everything is about learning, and there is no such thing as a bad experience. You learn from it, whether it's a relationship at school or a best friend you fall out with or working. I've actually seen it as a positive, and I now look at it as a great experience. But at the time when I was in it, financially probably wasn't the best decision, but looking back, by sticking at it and really just that resilience of believing in it. I think you have to take a bit of a risk sometime in business, and sometimes they pay off, and if they don't, you just take a step up and you brush yourself down and you just get on with it. I think a lot of it's down to personality, to be honest with you.
Yeah, great. But we can, but again, turning negative things into positive things.
Absolutely, every time,
yeah.
Every time.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I'm going to turn over to Dinika, and then we're going to have both of you participate in the Q&A with the questions that are coming in at a rate of knots. So,
that's good.
Of
course. Thank you.
Start us off and on your journey, and thank you again. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Kay, for that really inspiring introduction about your career and your life. It's incredible to see sort of the building and then the headhunting and not having a real sort of background in math is actually something that I want to start with, because my background is almost the contrary to yours in every single way. So I never thought I would be talking about mathematics. I mean, I think this is a dream for me, and has been for a long time, because I was that student who celebrated Pi Day when no one else did. And you
don't mean fruit pie, do you?
No.
Fantastic.
And so I am a contrary to you in many other ways, because I studied mathematics in university. I was frequently the only girl in a lot of these classes, focused on vectors and stochastic processes. But I think it all came together when I was in university, and when I decided that math was for me. It changed my life in a couple of ways, because I was able to prove that I could do the things that the boys could do. And I think for me, that was really, really powerful, because it gave me the confidence to apply to the dream jobs I never thought that I could achieve. And I'll start my story of my career there, because my goal was really, okay, I need to find a way to pay off my college debt. I'm pretty good at math. And so what is the combination that can get me to a place where I can, be independent, be a woman living in a city, but not dependent on my parents? And that was all very important to me. And I applied to jobs in banking, similar to you, but with a slightly different motivation. It was one where I needed to, ensure that my parents were relieved of their obligations to feed me, but yet, be and try to be successful in my own right. So I remember getting a job at HSBC in their sort of graduate investment banking program, and sort of at that moment being incredibly thankful to my, my passion for mathematics, because in a lot of the tests that were required to get me there, a lot of it required sort of your ability to do simple math, but do it quite quickly. So, my career started at Canary Wharf, at HSBC, spent a number of years there, was a banker and worked in different capacities in banking for about 7 years. And Uber was a client of mine when I was a banker. I was fascinated to see that a product that I was using and something that was so cool and trendy that my friends were all sort of consuming was then almost integral in getting married into my work life, which was, this client that I was talking to every day and helping, them fundraise and trying to solve problems for them. And, after sort of, coming to fruition and being successful in delivering what the client wanted to deliver and solving their problems, they asked me to join their team. And that's where sort of the risk-taking comes into play, right? Because, they told me to move to Amsterdam. I'd never visited or been to Amsterdam before. I'd never known anyone there, and took a plunge to be sort of the second finance hire in a tech company. Did not ever work within the technology industry before, but told myself, hey, I've built the right skill sets. I'm going to try really hard and I'm going to succeed. And I think, it's a combination of grit, of wanting to learn, wanting to succeed, and then having sort of the right basis and framework of being able to do your job, which is the analytical thinking that came from the maths that, shaped my earlier years, and the determination to learn from engineers and about engineering and about design and about all of these things that, I had no experience with, but, if I can do it, anyone in this group can. So I hope that all of you take that as everyone can do anything as long as you put your mind to it, and as long as you have, the base skill sets to be able to get there.
So a question for the people that you're looking to hire at the moment. What are the skill sets that they possess? So tell me what that looks like, so that those in the audience, as they think about accumulating skills so that they could work at Uber or AWS, what advice would you have for them? So, and what are you hiring for now? And maybe in 5 years' time, will you still be hiring for those skills?
Yeah, I think, what I've learned through 4 years of being a hiring manager at Uber so far is, there's skills that you can train for, and there's skills that, you have from either years of education or prior work experience. And I will say that it's almost attitude that is more important than aptitude. For most companies, especially most tech companies, it is the attitude, the willingness to learn, the hunger. I've seen it through people I've hired. I've seen it through people around me. If there's a will, there's a way, truly. But of course, there's certain types of roles that need certain types of really focused skills. So if you want to sort of build code and build an app, then yes, you will need to, understand Python and different types of scripts and go through the skill-based training to get there. But you will yeah.
So on those skills, but there's a question here saying, what skills do I need for a future for careers like yours? And what tips do you have for young people to get those skills? So what if they can't get those skills in their school? What do they do? What's the best way of approaching that?
Kay, do you want to go for that? And then I can take it after.
Okay, so, well, we have something which is quite funny, but in AWS we have something called Mind Tickles, and they literally are 3 or 4 minute videos that we share with people. I mean, you can go on to our website and you can have a look at them, and it gives you some indication of the sort of training that we encourage our employees to take. And it doesn't matter about tenure or experience, we all have to do them. But because they're very short, they give you a taster. They get the mind thinking. If you wanted to do something like engineering or your IT or HR or work within the sales environment, those little sort of modules of information will really set you up and say, yeah, that is something I'm interested in. Yes, that is something I'd like to do and I'd like to learn more. So I think we've done it like that's what I would encourage people to do, is to just do that, is almost be learn and be curious, and sort of look at the things that are around us today, talk to people that are in those industries. But also, as I say, from an AWS perspective, we have a slightly different way of doing it, but it encourages people to look at the company, and we're not just employing technologists, we are employing all sorts of people.
Great, thank you. Any follow-up on that, Dinika?
No, yeah, I would echo all of that. And I would just say there are many free resources. The Khan Academy, the internet is a beautiful place, and you can find a lot of really, really amazing things. And I constantly and consistently upskill myself through a lot of sort of free software and educational things out there. I'm sure we all do.
Great, thank you. Well, I think one of our partners at Founders for Schools, BBC, they've got a lot of career tips that are also, they, depending on whether or not you're 13, 14, 15, you can dial into those. Pleased to say that Founders for Schools is one of their partners. And we've also got we are recording this and the other webinars that we do with other people in other industries where we also record. So there's a library of folks like you that can help, help young people explore. Which I think, both of you talked about learning, and sometimes people think that they just learn at school and then they stop learning. Is that a myth? Or, yeah, that must be a myth from what both of you have said.
I personally don't think you ever stop learning. Bearing in mind, I joined AWS back in September. You have to go through an onboarding. So you join with all of these skill sets and you kind of leave them at the door, because you have to learn a whole new way of just finding your way around the building, to who are my colleagues, to how can I reach out, to how do I sign on to various systems and tools. So I don't think we ever stop learning. And then as we go through every career, and I'm sure Dinika will tell you the same, is you are encouraged every year to upskill. And whether that's through online training, whether that's through classroom training, or whether that's something you do outside of your role because you're interested in. So I don't think we ever stop learning. And doing things like this and mentoring, I do a lot of mentoring and coaching. You learn being the mentor as much as you do, if you were the mentee. And I think you can't beat some of these communication things that we're all sort of craving for. I think we crave for information. It's to get better at something.
Part of human nature, I agree.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm going to try to whiz through a number of these questions, so bear with me. So there's someone says, I want to be good at maths, but I struggle. Aside from getting a tutor, are there any other tips that you have? And again, one of you answering this unless the other violently agrees, and then we'll go to the next question.
Dinika, that's for you.
I can take that. So I have been a math tutor. I have been a math teacher, substitute teacher at a school when I was a teenager. And I will say that there are really, truly different approaches to learning maths. There is not one approach. There are different ways, and you can put the person who asked the question in direct contact with me, and I'm happy to sort of talk through the different ways that one can navigate your different aptitude levels of math. And again, there are also different types of math, right? It's not just geometry. You might be good at algebra, and you might be good at different types of math. And so I think just saying I'm bad at math is not is not a good enough answer for me, because I want to help the person who asked the question get deeper into really picking apart if it's all types, if it's the way of learning. Sorry, there's not a super easy answer.
That's okay. I also think I love the Khan Academy for maths as well. I think that they have, you know, amazing communicators, but you need to sort of know what you want to know when you're approaching Khan Academy. So maybe and that was a very generous offer that I suspect that I hope they heard. So we might put you in contact with them afterwards. I've got Amy, who's 14, from Milton Keynes, saying, "What would you put on your resume when you are getting your first job? Surely there would only be a few things to put on there." So which of you want to take that question? It's a tough question.
So I'll take it. I mean, I'm interviewing at the moment, and you know, I have a LinkedIn profile. You can go and have a look at it. And the one piece of advice that I was given was always started off with your key competencies. So is that, are you motivated? Are you a team player? What are your interests? So that everybody has core competencies. It doesn't have to be that you are particularly good at maths or English or a subject. It's about what makes you. Is it, I follow fashion, I'm really into music? Whatever your core competencies are, I think that's how a resume should start, because that's the first thing as a hirer, and I have hired a lot of people over the years. That's my sort of go-to line. I can look at their experience, but I actually like to see how they portray themselves and what they say about themselves. For me, that gets them into the door.
Great. Yeah, I think, again, both of your LinkedIn profiles were partially how we, you know, sort of let people know about today. I think what you say about yourself externally sends a lot of flags. The first thing I do with most people, even if I'm not interviewing them, is I look at their LinkedIn profile to see what their pathway has been. We've got Sophia, age 13, from Milton Keynes, who says, "I want to work in the motorsport industry when I'm older, but I keep getting put down as it's a male-dominated sport. What would be your advice?"
I can try. So I think while I'm not familiar with the motorsport industry at all, I am familiar with working in many male-dominated environments in my career. And I would say the only thing that will get you in the door is having the right skills and having the right mindset. So first of all, you need to know that people are going to put you down. You need to know that people are going to expect sort of less of you, but that's only natural, right? We're human. People will view something that's not like the other, and sort of question. And so I think, you know, what you have to do is sort of expect challenges and just think of how you're going to overcome them, either through more training, either through, you know, seeking female leaders in the space. It might not be in the UK. There are plenty of female race car drivers out there. Read their stories, be inspired by people who look like you, and hopefully that helps you get the foot in the door in terms of just shaping the right mindset to approach the industry.
Brilliant, thank you. A question from somebody in Manchester. It says, when you were working in banking, what was the work-life balance like? And is it better or worse? Yeah, I got a supplementary question. Is it better or worse than what it is now?
It's a really good question. I get asked that question very frequently, and it was awful. It was really bad. And I would work, you know, 12-hour days, sometimes weekends. But then again, I was 21 years old. I had energy. I was so excited. This was my first job. And so I didn't really think about the work-life balance then, if I was being totally honest. I was just really energetic and wanted to get the work done and wanted to make, you know, a mark. It did get draining because burnout is a real thing. It's a real thing at all ages. And you know, 3 or 4 years into the job, it did get to me. So I will say that even though, you know, it may be not on your radar, you know, you should always think about having like a healthy mind and body at the same time, and not spend, you know, 12 hours. I wouldn't say that is something I would recommend at all. That said, you know, my first couple of years at Uber were incredibly busy as well. But I think it was a different type of busy, because, you know, when you're building something and there's a team around you and there's a team building towards the same goal, and you guys, you know, eat dinners together, but, you know, also go for runs together. It's a bit of a different environment in certain sectors. And so, yeah. The work-life balance has always been a challenge. It's one that now that, you know, I'm looking to have a family and looking to, you know, embark on a different stage of my life, is something that I'm very cognizant I need to get right. But it's something I encourage everyone to think about from a very early age. Kay, I'm not sure if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I'd just like to add something. So, you know, over my career, I haven't really looked at the hours we work. We sort of do it to get the job done. And I think, to your point, yes, you work and live as a team. But I think what's been very obvious in these last sort of 6 or 7 weeks, certainly within AWS, and let's face it, Amazon and AWS are probably, you know, the biggest and busiest companies right now for everything that's going on in the world. And I think what we've been encouraged as leaders is to find different ways so that we balance that work-life balance. Otherwise, we would literally go from bed to the office to bed. And so we have virtual meetings, we have breaks in our day, our calendars are set differently. And so we've become better at it than when we were actually going into an office, sitting on a train for an hour and a half, sitting in meetings all day, to driving home to continue working. And I think a lot of that's been based on the current situation where people have, you know, they don't have childcare, they have, you know, the dog running around or the doorbell going that are distractions. And we as leaders have found different ways so that, you know, calls don't start till 9 o'clock. They, you know, they shouldn't start at 7:30 just because you're at home. We still have the end of a day, we still have lunch in the middle. If you choose to work after it, that's okay, but we have something on our emails that say, you make the decision to respond, I choose the hours I work. And because people are having to work different hours. And I think that's something that's happened. And I know certainly from AWS that when we come out of the situation we're currently in, that will be continued because people have adapted so well to the situation and working.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to have 2 more questions because we're slightly we're at the end, but there's more questions and I feel a need to try to answer them. So one is Amy. It says, how much maths would you need to know if you're still interested in both science and math, but possibly science a little bit more? So again, I guess they're almost assuming that you can't do maths and science at the same time, but how do you help Amy think through that question?
Yeah, for sure. I can take a stab at this. So using my experience, I was declared chemistry major in university. So even though I was very passionate about maths, you know, I decided to major in chemistry. I then had the ability, American school systems, to change that at the very end to become a mathematics major. And so my recommendation for you, if you like both math and science, is understand your own motivations, right? So is there an end career goal that you're looking towards? Like, do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a pharmacist? Do you want to be a chemist? Do you just want to work in a field that's analytical and math driven? And that should be able to sort of guide you a little bit deeper by thinking about sort of where you want to get to at the end. And if your real passion lies in like biology or chemistry, then the math will come when you like go deeper in these subjects, because math is core in the understanding of science as well.
Thank you. We did a little bit of research around that recently when we were looking into Maths4Girls as an encounter type. And what we heard from Stanford, Harvard, MIT, UCL, Imperial, and Cambridge universities was that math was a foundational subject that would serve you very well in any of the other subjects. And if tried to do the other subjects without a basic understanding of math, then you'd have a harder time, which I think must be true because they all agreed with each other, and these institutions don't always agree with each other. I think I'm going to bring that to an end. So if I had to summarize some of the things, the messages I've heard from you: do your best. There's no such thing as a bad experience. Attitude eats aptitude for breakfast. And that you always keep learning, whatever, you never stop learning, and whatever environment you go into, it's a building block for the next thing that you're going to do. So Kay and Dinika, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. I know it's personal. I think it'd be hugely frustrating and confusing to students at the moment, thinking about the role ahead of them, and I'm sure they were inspired. I was absolutely inspired by both of you, and I'm grateful for the time that you spent with us today. So,
thank you very much indeed. Thank you for inviting us.
Of course. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.